Just taking a moment to recognize the goodness, to, to bring our attention to it. The goodness is always here. It's always within us. It's always in the room. It's always around us. And part of what we're doing is learning to bring our attention to it. Because there's also going to be car alarms and rotten apples and difficult people and sickness and sadness. And weather. But the goodness is here. It's available. And we can turn to it like medicine. When we want to feel better, feel healthy, and feel awake and energized, we sometimes take medicine. And goodness, seeing it, recognizing it, finding it, seeking it out, building a habit of bringing our attention to it is like medicine for the heart. The cause for metta, what brings up metta, loving kindness, goodwill, is seeing goodness. We can't manufacture it out of anger, aversion, or frustration. We have to look for what is good and soak it up and recharge our metta batteries. Which is not to repress or push everything else away or pretend it doesn't exist. But it's in order to. We have to build our metta. We have to recharge our metta batteries so we can skillfully deal with that which is difficult, that which is hard to bear. We don't take medicine or Tylenol for the sake of alleviating a headache. We take it so we can get on with the business of living our lives and being skillful with others and doing what we want to do, what we're meant to do in a harmonious way. And so the same goes for taking the medicine of goodness. It's a gift to future us. Now, as we move toward silent meditation, if you would like to, you can make goodness, seeing goodness, a sense of goodwill, your anchor in the body. And how you do that is by bringing attention to a part of the body, the heart or the belly or the brain, head space, even the knee or the hands. Bring your attention to that place and then turn the mind toward the memory or the experience of something good. And we don't need to get caught up in the content of it or what it was specifically. Or who it was or how it was. But we can bring that sense of a good feeling into the body, into that place in the body. Allowing the muscles to relax, the skeleton to be light. That place in the body to feel full and complete. And to just sense that feeling of goodness, happiness, ease, delight. And when the mind wanders away, as it naturally does, toward planning and memory, opinion, sleepiness, restlessness, when we remember, we can guide the attention back to the body, back to that place that we filled with goodness. Again and again and again. Okay, just a few words from Ajahn Chah. Suppose there is a monk who resolves to stay with things, not to run away. He looks after himself, he knows himself and others, he's continually dealing with problems. Suppose he's the abbot. An abbot faces a constant stream of things demanding attention. People are always asking questions, so you must be constantly on the alert, constantly awake. Before you can doze off, they wake you up again with another problem. This is true if you're the abbot of your life too. before before you can doze off, whoever they are, they wake you again with another problem. This leads you to contemplate and understand things. You become skillful in regard to yourself and others in many, many ways. This skill arises from contact, from confronting and dealing with things, from not running away. We don't run away physically, but we run away in the mind, using our wisdom. We understand with wisdom right here, we don't run away from anything. This is a source of wisdom. One must work, must associate with other things. For instance, living in a big monastery, we all must help look after things. Looking at it in one way, you could say that it's all defilement. Living with lots of monks, nuns, and novices, with many lay people coming and going, many defilements may arise. But we must live like this for the development of wisdom and the abandonment of foolishness. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to live in order to get rid of our foolishness or to increase it? We must contemplate. Whenever eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind make contact, we should be collected and circumspect. When suffering arises, who is suffering? Why did this suffering arise? The abbot of a monastery has to supervise many disciples. This may cause suffering. If we are afraid of suffering and don't want to face it, where are we going to do battle with it? If suffering arises and we don't know it, how are we going to deal with it? Escaping from suffering means knowing the way out of suffering. It doesn't mean running away from wherever suffering arises. By doing that, you just carry your suffering with you. If you want to understand suffering, you must look into the situation at hand. The teachings say that whenever a problem arises, it must be settled right there. Where suffering lies is right where non-suffering will arise. It ceases at the place where it arises. You should settle the issue right there. Suffering is none other than the first noble truth. Isn't that so? Are you going to look on it as something bad? The truth of suffering, the truth of its cause, the truth of its cessation, and the truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Running away from these things isn't practicing according to the true Dhamma. The Buddha taught us to run away using wisdom. For instance, suppose you step on a thorn or splinter and it gets embedded in your foot. As you walk, sometimes it hurts, sometimes not. Sometimes when you step on a stone or a stump, it really hurts. So you feel around on your foot, but not finding anything, you shrug it off and keep walking. Eventually you step on something else and you feel the pain again. This happens repeatedly. What is the cause of that pain? The cause is that splinter or thorn embedded in your foot. The pain is constantly near. Whenever the pain arises, you take a look and feel around a bit, but not seeing the splinter, you let it go. After a while, it hurts again, so you take another look. This is why we need multiple lifetimes to finish the work, because we can be very slow on the uptake. What is the cause of that pain? The pain is constantly near. When suffering arises, you must note it. Don't just shrug it off. Whenever the pain arises, you note, that splinter is still there. Whenever the pain arises, there arises also the thought that the splinter has got to go. If you don't take it out, there will only be more pain later on. The pain recurs again and again until the desire to take out the thorn is constantly with you. In the end, it reaches a point where you made up your mind once and for all to get that splinter out because it hurts. Now, our effort in the practice must be like this. Wherever it hurts, wherever there's friction, we must investigate. Confront the problem head on, take that thorn out of your foot, just pull it out. Wherever your mind gets stuck, you must take note. As you look into it, you will know it, see it, and experience it as it is. But our practice must be unwavering and persistent. They call it putting forth constant effort. Whenever an unpleasant feeling arises in your foot, for example, you must remind yourself to get that thorn out. You don't give up your resolve. Likewise, when suffering arises in our hearts, we must have the unwavering resolve to try to uproot the defilements, to give them up. Greed, hatred, delusion. The resolve is constantly there, unremitting. Eventually, the defilements will fall into our hands where we can finish them off. I think a question that plagues Buddhists is, how do I deal with anger? What do I do with anger? I guess this is multiple questions. Why do I still have anger? Should I use my anger? I was taught that anger is fuel. I was taught that anger is useful. Anger gives me a lot of energy. Can I use it? How can I be skillful with anger? Can I be skillful with anger? I think we get into, a lot of confusion, really entangled in that question, in those questions around anger. And then even when we hear an answer, from this framework or from the Buddha, there's still that piece in the heart that fights with it. Conflict arises. What do you mean? What do you mean anger is not my best tool in this situation? I shouldn't be repressing my feelings. I have to use anger if it works. There's a lot to be angry about. But I read something recently that helped me really clarify it. And it wasn't from a Buddhist text or from the Pali Canon, but when you see something that it aligns or that it doesn't align. If you spend a lot of time in this work, doing this work, meditating and drawing near to the teachings, when you see something, whether it aligns or not. Or at least you're interested to investigate. And that's what happened to me this recently with this bit that I read about anger. It really resonated. And it was that repressing anger, pushing it down, pretending it's not there, washing it over, is the same coin, is one side of the same coin as acting out of anger, barfing it all over a situation and other people, using the energy to move. So repressing it on one hand, pushing it down, pretending it doesn't exist, that's not very Buddhist. We know that. Because as Ajahn Chah was saying here, we want to see We want to be with our suffering. We have to know it. We have to see it. We have to understand it. We have to bring it up. We have to get familiar. We have to spend time with it. But also, if we're spending time with it, shouting at other people, screaming at other people, complaining about life, then we're not using it skillfully in either of those cases. And the Buddha asks us to use our feelings, our emotions, our thinking, our sense contact. He asks us to use these things skillfully. And so there's the middle way, I think, which is to see it, bring it up, be with it, feel it, recognize it, invite it in, allow it, and let it cease. So that's what the Buddha is saying here is wherever suffering arises, that is the place where it ceases. Wherever anger arises, that is the place where it can cease. And that's the work of this particular framework of Buddhism, is to recognize that everything is born, lives its life, and dies. That's the nature of all conditioned phenomenon, particularly our emotions, our thoughts, our relationships. Being in the world, we see that everything that we come in contact with is born, lives its life, and dies. And the question that I've had to ask myself many, many, many times is how much trouble am I going to make while the thing is living its life? So we know it's going to be born, some unskillfulness. It's going to live its life, and it's going to die. It has to die. We let it die. But how much trouble, how much problem am I going to make out of its life while it's living? You know, and if I push it down, it doesn't get to live its life, which is not how things are. Things have to live their life, according to the Buddha, who I'm a big fan of. What he says, he usually works for me. But it has to live its life. We have to let it live its life. We have to see it. We have to acknowledge it. But do we have to make a problem for other people with it? Now, some people deserve problems, and we're going to give them problems. But don't forget, compassion also arises and lives its life and dies. And so we have to make the most that we can make of that skillful conditions life. When compassion arises, it's time to go for it. That's when it's time to make trouble. When compassion arises, we want to make the most of that life before it did, because it will. Compassion arises, and pretty quickly, it's dead. For me, lately, I get these fleeting moments of compassion, and then they're dead. Then anger's up, lives its life, dies. Then metta's up, live its life, dies. So we have to be skillful about what we do with the life that's being lived. And what energy to really act on while it's up, while it's active. Because if we act on something, if we act on an intention that's arisen, like compassion, then we're going to give it more life. That's what karma is. acting on something creates the habit to act on it again. It creates the habit to act on it again. Pretty soon we're acting out of compassion all day long, and it's really good. But if we act out of anger, then we act out of anger again, and it's easier to act out of anger again. I wasn't going to let you fill in the blank. I'll fill in the blank. So we get to make some choices in this, right? What do we want to be making the most of? Because we always have the choice to make the most of something that's up, that's busy living its life. And as we become more skillful or seasoned in the practice, or more interested even in doing the work, then we start to have choices about what even comes up. What is going to be born? What am I going to allow to be born? We can start to pick and choose. Actually, I'm going to give birth to this thing that I know is good, this thing that I know is helpful, this thing that I want to see live its life. That was, kind of the guided meditation today, was how to give birth to goodness, how to give birth to compassion and keep it going, how to give birth to appreciative joy, how to give birth to equanimity. We can practice all of these things, so eventually we can choose what comes up. And that's all we really want, I think, is to choose our tools, is to pick up what we want to pick up, to respond how we want to respond, to have the energy to react quickly and compassionately, and for the best interest of ourselves and others. That's what we want. We end up doing all kinds of other things because we have past karma, and we were parented a certain way, or went to school in a certain way, or learned to use our emotions in a certain way to stay safe. But in this practice, in this framework, in this Buddhism, we're already safe. Now we can be safe. Safe from our own ill will and harmful tendencies. We can be safe, and we can be a place of safety for others. But it takes cultivating that will to choose, to make the choices, rather than, responding to what comes up in our own minds and hearts. But then, doing that too. It's just a virtuous cycle. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for your kind attention. We have some time for questions or comments, stories. Online folks, in person. If you have anything you'd like to share, we'd love to hear it. Steve.
I know that you really already talked about this, but would you just talk a little bit more about sort of the feeling comes up when you see a version of like frustration? Okay, so there's anger that keeps coming up, and now I'm frustrated about it. Like aversion to aversion, that like I think. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, aversion is pretty normal. When I see something I don't like, aversion comes up. It's just how our minds are conditioned. All these brains work the same way, I think, until we train them otherwise. Aversion to aversion might be more dangerous, Because we really want to see, like Ajahn Chah was saying, we want to see what triggers our aversion. We want to see it and we want to investigate it. So, what triggers my aversion? Maybe it's uh, someone screaming about religion in the streets. Encountered that yesterday. I mean, it didn't bring up too much aversion, but it was really loud. It hurt my ears. It hurt my heart a little bit. Um, what am I averse to? What about that is bringing up aversion? Oh, it's a view that's different than mine. It's something I consider harmful, and then we get under that. Oh, I don't know if I can do anything about that, but I have a lot of compassion for the people that it's hurting, and how can I help? Often I think that aversion to the aversion is a route to compassion. Like aversion's coming up, and I think right away, like, oh, why am I mad about this? I thought I was beyond getting mad about this kind of stuff, right? But we're not beyond getting mad about stuff or getting frustrated by people or being assaulted or feeling assaulted by contact. And Ajahn Chah and the Buddha talked about that over and over, that our six senses, which includes the five senses plus activity of the mind, are our six teachers. So if I see something and aversion's arising, investigate it. The opposite of aversion isn't attraction, it's curiosity. I'm averse to something. Something's coming up that's really got my goat. Can I get curious about what I don't like here? And so if we go straight to aversion about our aversion, we're really not allowing that knowledge to bubble up and give us information. We're sort of maybe doing a little, I don't know what's happening with you, but a little spiritual bypassing or sort of shooting ourselves. I should be better than this by now. And I think what Ajahn Chah was really saying here is we're just learning. We just want to keep learning because really we want to let go of these unskillful responses, but we can't do that until we know why they're coming up and really understand the nature of our unskillful responses. Yeah. Yes.
Conversation about aversion, but also anger is in my own practice. The reliability that we were talking about last week, to view my anger as an act of love for myself that informs me that a boundary is, right? So my anger is a part of myself that loves me greatly because it says I refuse to be treated this way.
Yes.
And so if I take my practice into consideration when that anger arises, what comes from it is knowledge about my own boundaries, what my needs are, and how they're not being met by what's happening around me.
Yes.
Right? And it helps me move through that in a different way.
Yeah.
Anxiety is the same way, right?
Exactly.
Anxiety is a self-protecting emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can pause with it long enough to say, why are you here? What are you trying to save me from?
Yes. Can we have a conversation about that? That is curiosity coming up in the moment. Okay.